Draco, not Malfoy, right? Not the villain of Harry Potter, but Draco or Dracon, which some people think may be a name associated with a lot of these mythical kings like Cecrops and Erichthonius are represented either as snakes, as having the body of snakes, or as wrestling with snakes. And this is another kind of feature of this hereditary ancestral mythology, right? Is the snake is kind of a ruling figure. So perhaps Dracon kind of that might harken back to this because Dracon means snake or lizard in Greek. But it may just well have been his real name. We're in the 7th century BC now, the 600s BC, and we're focusing especially on the date of 621. It's not entirely exact, but seems like a good place to kind of put our finger. 621, we get the laws of Draco, which are written down. And this is super important because Draco, right, the reason why Draco Malfoy in some ways is called Draco Malfoy, besides the fact that it means dragon, is that we have our idea of draconian, right, of just severe, harsh punishment. And this is because there are, extremely harsh penalties for all sorts of things, especially homicide, right, in the draconian law. And the Greeks themselves would later come to say that these laws were written in blood and not in ink, right? So it's not like we are inventing this idea. And so on that level, he hasn't been, hard done by in the historical record. But there is one way in which I think he has been hard done by. And that is that, when we say, oh, Draco was this, evil guy, we always have to ask compared to what, right? Just the same way that when we say, well, oh, Athenian democracy, right, was only available to citizen men of age, right? And women and slaves were kept out. And this is like, it's certainly true, and there's no problem with mentioning it, but to suggest that somehow invalidates this miraculous achievement that we're going to be talking about here, how it comes into being, is ludicrous, because you always have to ask, what's the context in which this is going on? And the context in which this is going on is that murder, especially, right, in primitive societies, is a tribal affair. It's a religious affair, and it's a tribal affair. So, Bob kills Joe, and the house of Joe, right, is now engaged in raining holy hell down upon the house of Bob. And we know, famously, from, you only have to watch The Godfather to know how this plays out. This is an unending cycle of violence. And we've sort of visited this a little bit before in Athenian history. But they were acutely conscious, the Athenians were, that this kind of thing never finished, because of course when the house of Joe rains violence down upon the house of Bob, Bob Jr., right, Bob's son, is not going to then like grow up and be like, well, justice has been done. Like he's going to think probably that Bob had reason to kill Joe, and so now he's been deprived of a father, and he has this vendetta, right, forever against. I always think of the Simpsons, farfalla vendetta, when Sideshow Bob's son is born. This is an obscure reference, but when Sideshow Bob's son is born, he's born to a passionate Italian, and he sees a little butterfly flying by. Farfalla is butterfly in Italian. He says farfalla vendetta, and pulls out his knife to try to kill it. And so this is like the kind of parody of the idea that these things then get ingrained, like the Hatfields and the McCoys in Mark Twain, right? These things get ingrained into the ancestral memory, just like these myths do. And if your myths are about an ancestry that goes back to the very dirt, right, that goes back to the soil of the earth, how can you ever escape the notion that you're just going to be in these constant back and forth blood feuds? This is what Draco is trying to deal with. This is the problem that Draco is there to solve. Once you write the rules down, like anybody that can read can go and find them out, right? So maybe they're very harsh, but we compare them. They're often compared to the Code of Hammurabi, right, in the Near East. And this is this remarkable stone document, right, with written rules. And it's an apt comparison, because that too has very harsh penalties for things like murder and theft. But once the penalty is paid, it's paid, right? As Lincoln said after the Civil War, right? We've paid the price now for this sin, and now we're going to stitch up our wounds. And so, actually, even though we think of these as draconian laws, they're actually laws designed to put a limit, right? To put a discernible, definable cap on bloodshed. So, crucial turn, right, away from tribal violence as the mode of so-called justice, right? Toward isonomia, toward this idea that laws apply across the board, and once justice has been done, it's been done.